Alright, y'all. Check this out. BCM Raider here, bringing you another Commander deck tech. Today, we're looking at my friend's Kinnan Prodigy deck. We all know Kinnan by now. He's a very popular EDH commander in the Simic colors. This is a very powerful card. And what we're primarily doing is creating lots and lots of mana to do very large spells and various combos and stuff. So what Kinnan actually does is whenever you tap a non-land permanent for mana, you will add 1 mana of any type that permanent can produce. He also has a activated ability for 7 mana, 5 in a blue and a green. We get to look at the top 5 cards of our library and put any non-human creature card from among those on the battlefield, and the rest go on the bottom. So the whole premise of what we're going to be doing is generating as much value as possible by creating infinite mana or just large amounts of mana and doing crazy big dumb things. So let's get right into it. First up, let's get into the creatures, because the creatures are very specific and they're the ones going to be producing most of the mana for us. So we're not running very many humans as the type, but we have Magus of the Candelabra. This is a very, very powerful card. It has a activated ability where however much mana we pay into Magus of the Candelabra, we get to untap that many lands. Next we have Kiora's Follower. This is a very low costing creature that's not a human, that has a very powerful activated ability of untapping another permanent. Now we have Gretchen Titchwallow. This is a newer card I'm not quite familiar with, but this has a activated ability where we can just continually draw cards and put lands from our hand onto the battlefield. Now we have Cross and Restore. This has a activated ability of untapping a land. Now we have Karametra's Acolyte. This will add a lot of mana for us, and because of Kinnan, most of these creatures that have mana abilities will generate even more mana. Now we have Gyre Engineer. This will ultimately add a total of 4 mana just by activating it once. Now we have Regal Behemoth. Just when Regal Behemoth enters the battlefield, we're going to become the Monarch. So if we're still the Monarch, every single end step we get to draw a card, but it has a static effect. Whenever we tap a land for mana, if we're the Monarch, we get to add 1 mana of any color. Now we have Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. This is a very powerful card. Every single non-token creature is going to be a forest land in addition to its other types. So what that means is it's going to trigger landfall, assuming we have some kind of landfall effect. But more importantly, every single creature is going to be able to tap for mana. And now we have Omnath, Locus of Mana. Specifically, green mana isn't going to empty from our mana pool as the phases change, but Omnath is going to get very large, and we're going to use that in many different ways. Now, to ensure we can continually play lands, we can play lands from our graveyard. Now we have Selvala, Heart of the Wilds. This is a very, very good card. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if its power is greater than each of other creatures' power. So if it's a bigger creature and it enters, and if it happens to be bigger than another creature we control, we get to draw a card. But more importantly, we're after the activated ability of paying a green and then adding X mana of any combination of colors, where X is the greatest power among creatures. Now, to ensure that all our permanents untap all the time, we have Seedborn Muse. Now we have a very powerful one with Nyx Bloom Ancient. This is going to triple the amount of mana a permanent will produce. Now we have a very interesting one with Myr Landshaper. We're going to have the option of turning a land into an artifact. This is only here really for one very specific purpose, which I'll get to in just a moment. But what we're going to be doing with Myr Landshaper is dealing with our opponent's lands. And because we're going to be producing a whole bunch of mana, why not have a bunch of big creatures that we can dump mana into, such as Hydroid Krasis. Just when Hydroid Krasis enters the battlefield, we're going to gain half X life and draw half X cards, rounded down. But it's going to enter with X +1 counters on it, and it's a flying creature with trample. Similar to that, we have Stone Coil Serpent. This has reach, trample, and protection from multicolored. Seeing how majority of our opponent's stuff is multicolored, we're going to do a really good job in blocking these things. And of course, we have Walking Ballista. We are going to have the ability to create infinite mana. So if we create a infinite Walking Ballista, our opponents are infinitely dead. And that sounds like fun. Now we have a fun one with the Tristecaphile. I don't know. I can't pronounce this card. Anyway, we have no maximum hand size, and at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have exactly 13 cards in our hand, we get to win the game. So, because we're going to be producing a lot of mana, we can activate this guy just to draw a card. So, we can manipulate our hand to where we have exactly 13 cards at the end of someone's turn. That way we win the game at the beginning of our next upkeep. Follow suit with drawing lots of cards. If we happen to draw our entire library, we're just going to win the game with Thassa's Oracle or Laboratory Maniac. We are running 3 very, very important Planeswalkers. So we have Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, similar to Thassa's Oracle. This is just another win condition to where we can draw cards. And if our library has 0 cards in it, we win the game. And to stay with producing lots of mana, we have Nissa, who shakes the world. This is a very powerful card. Every time we tap a forest for mana, we're going to create a additional green mana. And we can +1 Nissa to put 3 +1 counters on a land. It'll become a creature. It'll untap it, and it'll gain vigilance. Now we have Garruk Wildspeaker. We're only pretty much focused on his +1 ability of untapping 2 lands, but we can produce 3/3 beasts if we need to, and if we develop a very go-wide strategy, we can give all our creatures +3/+3 in trample. Okay, let's get into the enchantments. These enchantments are going to help us by producing a lot of mana, but also they're going to have the possibility of creating infinite combos. So first up is Heartbeat of Spring. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, it'll produce a additional mana of that color. Now, to ensure that all our mana is up and ready to go, we have Wilderness Reclamation. At the beginning of our end step, we get to untap all of our lands. Now we have a similar one with Dictate of Karametra. This enchantment has flash, so you can play this card as an instant, like at the end of your opponent's turn. But whenever a player taps a land for mana, it's going to produce a additional mana. Now we have Frontier Siege. This has two different modes, depending on which one you choose when it enters the battlefield. The cons side is at the beginning of each of your main phases. That counts your first main phase and your post-combat main phase. You're going to add 2 green mana. The dragon side we're not going to worry too much about. Now we have Zendikar Resurgent. Whenever we tap a land for mana, it's going to add a additional mana. And whenever we cast a creature spell, we get to draw a card. Now we have Unbound Flourishing. Whenever we cast a permanent spell with mana cost that contains X, we double that value of X. And whenever we cast a instant or sorcery or activate a ability, if that spell's mana cost or that ability's activation contains X, we get to copy that spell or ability. Okay. Now we have a win condition on its own with Simic Ascendancy. This is a activated ability where we pay a colorless, a green, and a blue. We get to put a +1 counter on target creature. And then whenever one or more +1 counters are put onto a creature, we put that many +1 counters on Simic Ascendancy. And then at the beginning of our upkeep, if Simic Ascendancy has 20 or more counters on it, we win the game. Now we have Penman's Aura. This is a enchantment aura that has various different modes if we pay mana into it. Most of the one that we're going to care a little bit more about is the untapping the enchanted creature. Similar to that, we have Freed from the Real. This has the option of tapping the enchanted creature or untapping the enchanted creature. We're going to use this to create infinite mana. Okay, let's get into the artifacts. First up is Soul Ring. We have our Arcane Signet, our Talisman of Curiosity, our Sensei's Divani Top, so we can look at the top card and decide if it's the right card that we need. Now we have Gilded Lotus. Gilded Lotus is going to produce a lot of mana for us. And just to make sure we can gain life and keep things rolling, we have Elixir of Immortality. And to produce infinite colorless mana, we have our Basalt Monolith and our Rings of Brighthearth. Rings of Brighthearth isn't just here for Basalt Monolith. It's for any permanent that has a activated ability that's not a mana ability. So we can just pay 2 and copy whatever activated ability we want just by paying 2. So if we have Kinnan and we activate his activated ability of looking at the top 5 cards and putting a non-human creature card from among those on the battlefield, we can pay 2 mana and copy that ability. So ultimately, we can get out every single creature in our entire deck except for 3. Okay, let's get into the instants. Most of these are just going to be ramp spells or counter spells or ways to win the game on the spot. So we have Worldly Tutor. This will go get whatever creature we want and put it on top of our library. Now we have Growth Spiral. That way we can instant speed draw a card and put a land onto the battlefield. For a little protection, we have Veil of Summer. This will protect us from black and blue spells. This will ensure that we can go infinite and win the game. Now we have Crossing Grip. That way we can deal with our opponent's artifacts or enchantments and they can't interact with it because it has split second, so it ends the stack. Now we have Plasm Capture. This is a fun counter spell. We counter the spell, and then at the beginning of our next pre-combat main phase, we get to add X mana. It's kind of like a mana drain, but it won't be colorless mana. Now we have our Arcane Denial. We have our good old-fashioned counter spell. And we have Disallow. Disallow, I feel, is actually very powerful. Not only is it a counter spell, but it can counter a activated ability or triggered ability as well. And to deal with our opponent's entire board, we have Cyclonic Rift. There's really not too much more I need to say about Cyclonic Rift. It's pretty much a blue staple now. And to protect our board even more, we have Heroic Intervention. Okay, now we have a series of X spells. Now we have Stroke of Genius. We can either draw our entire deck and then cast Thassa's Oracle and win the game that way, or we can target a opponent and make them draw their entire deck, and then they would lose the game. Similar to that, we have Blue Sun Zenith. We can target whoever we want to draw as many cards as we want them to. Now we have Squall Line. Squall Line is very, very interesting because it'll deal X damage to each creature with flying and each player. So this will deal with our opponent's flyers, but not mess with our board. Even though we will be taking some damage, but at that point, if we found a way to gain enough life and our opponents are at a lower life total, we could just kill our opponents with this card alone. Okay, let's get into the sorceries. Most of these are kind of ramp spells as well. So we have Rampant Growth. We have Cultivate. We have Kadama's Reach. Now we have Sylvan's Grind. That way we can go get whatever land we want. Now we have a fun one. We have Splinter. This will remove a artifact from the game, and we get to search their graveyard, hand, and library for all copies that are the same name as that exiled artifact. This was the card I was referring to with Myr Landshaper, where we're going to turn a opponent's land into an artifact, and then we're going to cast Splinter. So we're going to exile every single land of that type from our opponent's entire deck. It's kind of mean, but I think it's fun. Now we have Curse of the Swine. This is fun because we're going to exile our opponent's entire board, and we're just going to give them a bunch of 2/2 boars. And if our opponents have created a very large board, we're just going to steal it with mass manipulation. We're going to gain control of any number of target creatures or planeswalkers, or both. Now we have Hurricane. We're going to deal X damage to each creature with flying and each player. Now we have Wildest Dreams. We're going to return X target cards from our graveyard back to our hand. Okay, let's get into the land base. This is a very simple land base. We have our command tower. We have our birding pool. We have our rejuvenating springs. Our vine glimmer snarl. Our Simic growth chamber. Our temple of mystery. Now we have Lotus Veil. We have Lotus Field. That way we can produce as much mana as possible. And because of our devotion, we have Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx. Now we have Thespian Stage, so we can copy whatever land we want. And if we have a very large creature, we have Rogue's Passage. It'll become unblockable. Now we have Rashad Port. That way we can control our opponent's lands by tapping them down. Now we have Deserted Temple. We're going to use this to untap very certain lands that will produce a lot of mana. such as Nykthos or Lotus Field. Because we're going to be drawing lots of cards, we have Reliquary Tower. Now we have Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, so we can keep getting basics out of our library. Now we have some very specific lands. We have Magosi the Water Veil. That way we can continually take extra turns. Mystic Sanctuary. That way we can put very powerful instants and sorceries back on top of our library. Now to go get these lands, we have Teleria West. We have 7 islands and 10 forests. And that was the Commander deck tech for my friend's Kinnan Bonder Prodigy list. I really hope you guys enjoyed his build of Kinnan Bonder Prodigy. I would love to hear all your guys' suggestions about how to improve this build, such as maybe including a couple more fetch lands, some more dual colored lands, or possibly more mana dorks. But be sure to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on TikTok, share these videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.